I came here when there was no crude, nothing. Everywhere was so fine. People were enjoying by then. There was nothing like oil. There was nothing like spillage or so, or what they call it. This crude oil. It's a strange thing to us. I didn't know something like this can occur.
This is the headquarters of the oil slick watchdog in Benin City. Without the Friends of the Earth activists, a substantial disaster would have gone unnoticed. For every oil leak, the team publishes a report and travels to help stricken populations. The head of the organisation, Nemo Bassi, fights to stop an environmental and human disaster almost nobody speaks out about.
We have more than one oil spill every day. More than one oil spill every day in an area that is already heavily polluted. The best way to sum up the amount of pollution going on is to compare to the Exxon Valdez spill that happened in 1989 in Alaska. And it's estimated that what we have here in Nigeria every year is equivalent to one Exxon Valdez. So you're having this for decades, going on regularly.
The delta of the Niger River is a vast maze of creeks and mangroves, but in half a century, it has become the capital of oil slicks. There are no run-aground tankers or major pipeline leaks here, just a permanent sloppiness in the mining of crude oil. Millions of tons of oil have been dumped for years. Forests and rivers are poisoned, contaminated by a brown muck that covers vegetation and gets into the soil. A few weeks ago, in Abada Ilume, there was another significant pipeline leak. Murphy Akiri is here to assess the damage.
Now, you see, when it flows in like that, it now started coming in. It flowed for 3 weeks. Now look, can you see? This is not water. This is the paper. Okay, this is what we got. Now let's try with the matches and let's see whether anything still can strike. What are you seeing? What are you seeing? What is that?
For miles around the leak, water is no longer drinkable and lands are unworkable. The entire ecosystem has been destroyed. Already mutilated by the installation of pipelines, the forest is now poisoned, as if a black plague has infected the environment. In the next village, inhabitants are furious. Everyone here gets their livelihood from the natural environment. These Nigerians believe that the oil mining hasn't brought them anything, but has cost them dearly.
It's unfortunate that the trend of the pipeline passage through the community is so disastrous to the community than for it to be a blessing, it's now becoming a total cost on the community.
It's a curse that has taken root in Ulubari, in the state of Bayelsa. In 1956, the Shell company opened the sluice gates of the first oil well in Nigeria. It has since closed, but 7,000 kilometers of pipelines now crisscross the Niger Delta. 2 years ago, one of these arteries failed, right in the middle of the jungle, in the village of Okpotowari.
We are going to the highest place area. Where the highest place destroys the area, you will see it with your eyes. Definitely, it is well destroyed.
Agip, an Italian firm, has admitted to being at fault for the leak, but to avoid compensating the local population, it has seriously underplayed its responsibility.
Date of spill, 12 July 2008. Property of Nahok, Nigerian Hajip Oil Company. And going by the interpretation, look at it. This is the underestimation of the quantity that was spilled, they only wrote 20 barrels.
Something that covers the whole of this vast place, they say it's only 20 barrels. Here, they can allow a spill that is coming out with full force to continue for 1 month, 2 months, sometimes for weeks. And then they come and tell you it's 20 barrels for what? This is really outrageous. It's criminal.
This swamp was essential for life in several surrounding villages. Palm trees provided a local wine that is sold in town. Other trees, like the Iroko, provided timber for construction work. And finally, fishing was their main means of subsistence. In 2 years, there has been no indemnification or cleaning. There is serious evidence of double standards between corporate responses in the West and those enacted in impoverished nations like Nigeria.
This is a vast contrast with what we saw in America when President Barack Obama was on the side of the people during the Gulf of Mexico spill. That is the type of leadership we need in this country. But unfortunately, the oil companies and the government are one, cheating the local communities. And this is part of the reason why the Niger Delta is always in crisis. It's in crisis right from when oil was discovered in the 50s.
In Osayama Creek, there's no option but to keep fishing, although the flesh of the fish now tastes of kerosene. The water they use for drinking, cooking, and washing is polluted. Asami has been fishing these waters for years, and she has almost resigned herself to these permanent oil slicks. The Niger Delta has thousands of villages just like this one. Latrines line the same river where people wash themselves and clean the dishes. Sanitary conditions are horrific. And tens of millions of people are being ignored by the federal government and oil corporations. In Okpotawari, the inhabitants have been offered some minor considerations. Following the leak of 2008, the Italian firm Agip constructed a road for the villagers. But compared to the well that lies beneath the ground, these infrastructures are derisory. No health centre, no school. The closest town is 2 hours by boat. And as for permanent electricity, well, they're going to have to wait. While penetrating the jungle, worrying figures appear from the haze at a bend in the River Sound. In a secret glade, behind a curtain of smoke, 3 men are engaged in strictly illegal activities.
Crude or 20 liters to add ever. Crude mamma zoom brame. Mon jour de comme il est mon père monnaie. Para cargo. Mon père monnaie film. Mon twin line trapping monnaie film. Depuis there. Même vous film. Et because drum bullet to ayo monnaie.
It's another Nigerian paradox. The nation is wealthy with crude oil, but the citizens have no fuel. However, these illegal refiners are able to get petrol, diesel and fuel. For a few euros, transporters and individuals come here to be supplied. Emmanuel and his friends have made a real business from it. But working in these conditions is life-threatening. Here, everything can explode or catch fire at any time.
When I've been going, once I'm a few men. Me, like Barbara. What? Fear powder. And fear powder, neck more me buying. And then, so we pack away on Bravo. Kuru, Tonton Edmond. They are to see what they're doing. We have a Kuru. Really say, I mean, and I'm trying to your kurume. May I pay my cockpuru imbrame?
What these refiners won't tell you is that the crude oil they retrieve comes from pipeline sabotage. For a few years now, armed groups have fought for a fairer division of national oil income. These rebels regularly attack installations of foreign companies. They siphon off crude oil from pipelines and sell it. That's the alibi given by oil men to explain the oil slicks. But for ecologists, there is no doubt. Deep inside this tropical forest, it's really poor pipeline maintenance causing these repeated leaks.
And you can see over here, but you still get this. This is crude.
The United Nations Programme for the Environment has been investigating for 3 years to discover the culprits.
This is crude.
The first conclusions made the ecologists yell. The UN claims that 90% of the pollution comes from looting, and that only 10% was the result of negligence by the oil companies.
This over here. Let's get water. So what are you talking? Would a community person vandalize pipe to destroy his own thing? I don't know. The people that read such reports, do they think, would you by yourself shoot yourself on your leg? That is not true. Look, the government is in romance with the oil company, and the government invited you, the UNDP. And the UNDP, they stay in AC rooms, AC conferences rooms, discussing, drinking tea, having dinner party, luncheons and all. Did they really come into all these communities? Have they come into these communities and see for themselves how it happened? The report they are giving is what is being given to them by the oil companies.
Many of those accusations are very unfair. They never look at the complexity of the environment. They never take into consideration the security situation. I just told you that in 2009, 98% of the volume spilled in the Delta from SPDC operation was by sabotage. So how then can you accuse us of not respecting the environment?
The safety of installations and employees is indeed a major concern for oil companies. Through the years, rebels have intensified their operations. Expatriates have become one of their favorite targets. 80 foreigners were kidnapped in this region in 2010. But the state of Nigeria watches over. A special army unit is entirely dedicated to the protection of oil companies. Without admitting it, government forces act as a militia serving private interests.
The mission is to achieve general security. Security in the sense that to ensure that the militants does not threaten the oil companies. We also engage in the escort of very important personalities, that is VIPs, and the oil company officials and other workers, just to ensure that they work in peace within the Niger Delta.
In 2008, the conflict became so intense that crude oil production collapsed. In response, the government proposed an amnesty for the rebels, weapons and reintegration into civil life in exchange for peace. 20,000 men agreed to surrender. The army relentlessly hunts those still hiding in the creeks.
Those major militant leaders have all embraced amnesty. And I tell you, they are working with the government and with the task force in particular to pick out these remaining renegades, militant criminals from the region.
One more river to cross. One more river to cross. One more river to cross. Niger Delta freedom fighters. One more river to cross.
These are former rebels who accepted the amnesty. They left the jungle to be rehoused here, in a hotel in Port Harcourt. But they feel prejudiced against by the government and threaten to take arms once more.
Application of physical force, that is the violence itself, and we've done that. Is that by hitting somebody, using machete, or using even gun? But government has forgiven us, as God Almighty has forgiven us, and we've consented to government's position. And the government meant well by playing their part of the bargain. We've done that, we've given up arms. But if they compromise and fail Indirectly, they are pushing us back to the river, to the creek. They are pushing us to hit the wall, and we are going to bounce back. We don't compromise. This is business. We want a good life. We want to live a good life. We want to have bright future who can take care of our families.
In the meantime, these ex-rebels receive a government salary of between 100 and 300 euros a month. They must also take part in agricultural training. And the amnesty isn't really working. Weapons keep circulating in the Niger Delta.
As far as I'm concerned, JTF is a complete failure in the Niger Delta. It's a complete failure. They have not put in any sort of security. You know, every day people get kidnapped in this state. Every day people get killed in communities. If you go to the federal government right now, with what they have done so far with amnesty, and ask them, what is the number of militants in the Niger Delta that you are retraining? They don't know. What they wanted was that when the agitation was at its height, oil flow was lower and revenue was affected. Now, they wanted to do whatever was humanly possible to ensure that some guns are dropped, tension is low, so that oil will continue to flow.
85% of the Nigeria state budget comes from oil revenues. Other sectors, particularly agriculture, have been reduced dramatically. Nigeria was the first producer of crude oil in Africa, and over the years, its economy has become entirely based on the drilling of oil. Revenues are substantial, and inequities in the division of wealth create envy. Corruption rules at the head of the state. According to a note from the American embassy in Abuja, released by Wikileaks, crude oil buyers have apparently paid millions of dollars in bribes in order to allow their oil tankers to depart. The former Minister of Justice would have accepted $20 million just to sign a document. Meanwhile, the notion of an oil curse increasingly seems to make sense. People are poorer today in Nigeria than in the 60s. Its populations of the Delta received only a tiny share of the billions of dollars that crude oil brought. In order to get a share of this providential godsend, their final resort is to sue the oil companies. Here in Goy, 4 years ago, a badly maintained pipeline belonging to Shell burst, leaking toxic material for days. The village is now involved in a lawsuit with the Anglo-Dutch company.
How far is the case? Have you heard anything from our lawyer?
Yes, I had a phone call from the Netherlands, and they were briefing me on the latest development. And Shell were saying that they were innocent about the pollution. They have not come for negotiation to know how much they will pay for the damage as compensation to the property owners, individual property owners, and the community properties that the crude oil destroyed.
Why don't oil companies maintain their pipelines, allowing valuable crude oil to leak? It's a simple cost-benefit analysis. The cost of maintenance and the risk of kidnapping means it is cheaper to allow the loss than to avoid it. Nevertheless, oil men claim they are renovating polluted sites one by one.
When there is a spill, regardless of the cost, whether it is sabotage or crude oil theft or equipment failure, our role is to quickly contain it, clean it up, and restore the environment to its original state.
Do you manage to clean every spill that is caused by equipment failure?
Like I said before, regardless of the cause, whether it is equipment failure or sabotage, our role is to clean it up and restore the environment.
And you do it anytime?
And we do it pretty well. I mean, if I give you figures this year, we've cleaned up over 200 spill sites.
Mike Karikpo works on behalf of villagers. He has organised debates in the Netherlands because in Nigeria, procedures last on average between 10 and 15 years. And the indemnities are ridiculous compared to the damage that has been done.
The polluter pays principle is adhered to. As in, if you pollute in this environment, you pay for the remediation of the environment, you pay for the damages, and not pay the amount that Nigeria, the oil companies here pay in Nigeria. It's peanuts. Peanuts. People get paid maybe $300 for an oil spill. And in the US, in the Gulf of Mexico, for that oil spill, $20 billion has been set aside. to pay for damages alone, not for remediation, just for damages. When we are ready, we'll make sure that we call them to account, we hold them to account. They are corporate persons and they are accountable for their actions and they must be held to account. They are not above the law in Nigeria. If they are held to account in the US and in Europe, they must be held to account in Nigeria also.
Most of the time, victims of oil slicks give up or die before the Nigerian Court of Justice gives them a verdict. The trials, which will take place in Holland, where the headquarters of Shell's parent company are located, will have a double impact. There is a guarantee that the debates will be heard fairly in front of the judges, and they're drawing the attention of the international community to a drama that is poorly talked about in the media.
If Shell can come and wash this oil off this place so that we can live like other human beings on this earth. Here in Goi, we are dying. Maybe any moment from now, you may hear that the people of Goi are no more existing on earth. It's as a result of this oil spillage.
These rainbow-coloured reflections might spatter the waters of the Niger Delta for a long time. Here, nature and men are strongly bound together in a fight for survival. Without a fairer division of the oil income, without a renovated and healthy environment, these endless oil slicks will be forever feeding the bitter disappointment, anger and frustrations felt so strongly in this region of the world.